Welcome, and welcome back, everybody, the OK Grognard Show. It is Monday, April 26, 2021, 10 a.m. Central, in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And today, we're going to do a sort of outside the game look at the 1E First Edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons DM Screen. What's that baby look like? Should put a little more light on me. Maybe, huh? Alright, let's try that. That's not bad. Beautiful screen. Look at it. Isn't that something? Well, it was definitely a godsend when they finally put out the 1E DM screen because there is stuff on the screen from throughout the player's handbook and the DMG, and it's much more useful having it all right in front of you. Plus, you need something to hide your dice, right? Players can't be privy to every dice roll. We've discussed that in the past when we've talked about how some rolls need to remain secret from the players for various reasons. And I'll just reiterate them slightly here because players shouldn't always know whether they're successful or not when they attempt some things. And whether they're successful or not, they shouldn't always know if there were modifiers to the good or to the bad as to that roll. If they're unaware of some circumstance that gives them a benefit, and that benefit is supposed to be a secret, someone secretly helping them, then you want to be sure that the roll doesn't give that information away, the results from the roll, whether they are successful at what they're trying or not. So, anyway, DM screens are good for hiding rolls. No doubt about it. Just a quick look at this picture I've got up now, which shows the outside of the two 3-panel screens that I picked up for first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. The upper picture is the outside, and then the lower picture is the inside. So as you can see, there is definitely some player-facing information, and we'll get to what that is in just a moment. But most of the information is on the inside. Sadly, and I'm pointing at the lower screen, the right panel and the center panel is information on psionics. That is not something that I ever used. Well, I shouldn't say I never used it. I used it as a player in one campaign. I never used it as a DM. I'm familiar with it. I just always thought it was, I don't know, the anachronistic, out of place, inappropriate for a medieval fantasy campaign, which is what I like to run. I was never a adherent of campaigns that had science fiction technology in them, ray guns, that sort of thing. Some of the stuff in Blackmore put me on my heels. There's a lot of good stuff there, but that science fiction stuff, the idea that your game world is a reemergence of culture that is similar to medieval fantasy after in a post-apocalyptic time um, was never how I like to look at things. You know, I think it's Robert E. Howard's world that is meant to have been so far in the past that it has been washed away and forgotten on at least in in a very real sense, although remnants and some identities were meant to have then produced the culture that was on the planet in later times, in times that are now historic. So I preferred that sort of sense. This medieval fantasy or an alternate timeline where medieval fantasy exists in a world similar to a medieval world that we had, but with fantasy elements. So, everybody has their own way of approaching it. What I'd like to look at are the screens themselves, the upper screens first. And I have these on a Earfin View image software, image manipulation software. And we can look at some of these things. We're not going to obviously do anything that could harm the value for other people. These are not clear enough that you'd be able to screenshot this and use them. But the player facing side includes weapon types, approximate weight in gold pieces for those various weapons, lengths of them, speed factors, rather space required and then speed factors. A lot of this information gets a bit glossed over in a lot of games. I will admit it does in mine as well. I'm not even all that big on dealing with encumbrance, to be honest. I eyeball things if it doesn't look like you're carrying too much heavy. Hey, Sarah, welcome to the chat there. Sarah mentions the wheel of time turns and ages come and past. Yeah, Robert Jordan definitely had a great depth to the backstory of his world for sure. And let's not discount others like George R. R. Martin and Tolkien, who predates D&D. Those others, Jordan and Martin, obviously have a background in D&D, which adds to their world. Damage versus opponent on the right here. First size, small or medium, and then large. Weapons do different damages to different sized opponents. Hurled weapons and missiles, rate of fire, and then small or short, medium, and long range. Tells you what those ranges are, and you've got to know that there are penalties to hit for the longer ranges. And Sarah adds, but does the DM screen tell you how big a wagon is and how much cheese will fit? No, it really doesn't get quite into that. Sarah is referring to an original D&D game we both play in together, which we had a session yesterday afternoon, and we uh, we actually handle factions in this kingdom as mid to high level characters, and we hire on additional characters and soldiers, and Sarah's started up a trade organization, which I think all of the characters, all the player characters, joined in on, and we all do that. And she had to deal with the weight of cheeses in trade and transporting them. Down in the lower right of this panel, we have armor class table, which has the different types of armor, including armors plus shields in some cases, and then the rating from 10 through best on non-magical plate and shield at 2, 10 being no armor, shield only at 9, leather or padded armor at 8, and so forth. I think the artwork there, lovely, lovely, lovely. I think this is all Trampier art. Fantastic stuff. That, of course, on the left on the one screen is the, oh yeah, that's Errol Lotus on there. So there's a mix of art here. On the left there is the front cover of the player's handbook, of course, which is wonderful. This center part of this player-facing side of the screen is experience and hit dice and level titles, which is something that they used to do in the early editions of D&D. So you had a fighter table, magic user table, a thieves table, and a clerics table. Of course, your rangers and your paladins advanced the same way as fighters, assassins, as do thieves, illusionists, as magic users, and druids advance on the clerical table. The other thing to note here is that as you get up in higher levels, ninth, 10th, or above for fighters, you're adding hit points in. So good to know that stuff there. Kind of neat. All the higher levels do that. At the bottom of this screen, spells usable by class and level magic users, and spells usable by class and level clerics. Spell level across the top, the level of the character along the side. 6th level can use 3 first, 6th level cleric, 3 second, 2 third, much like my own cleric in the game that Sarah was referencing, even though it's original D&D. Actually, I think I'm lower than that. I think they're more generous with spells in first edition D&D. But don't forget also that in first edition D&D, your wisdom as a cleric can give you additional bonus spells. So there's that to consider. This does not include the unearthed arcana information, so you do not have cantrips here on the magic user table. I don't use that myself, so this is just fine for me. I use that as a resource for additional spells, but I don't use it out of the gate and all inclusively for cantrips and that sort of thing. So there we go. That's the outside of the screens. Let's look at the insides too. They are relative to their positions on the other image. So this screen up top includes the weapon table stuff on the outside, as you saw in just a few moments ago. We'll look a little closer and see what we have here. These are the attack matrices for clerics, druids, and monks on this upper left one. The one below it, fighters, paladins, rangers, bards, and 0 level halflings and humans, which would include some other attackers that are not of actual class levels. The upper right, attack matrix for magic users and illusionists. Notice it goes up in smaller, or rather fewer increments. So first to 6, you're stuck on this table for a magic user, whereas for a cleric, 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, and for fighters, you've got the 0 level. Then you've got 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. So you're advancing so much easier, obviously, as a fighter in physical combat. Attack matrix for thieves and assassins here, 1 to 4. And then, so you have 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, and 1 to 6. Clearing up any misconceptions if somebody did not think that clerics were better fighters in general than thieves. Down the bottom, again, an armor class description for the DM side. Creatures struck only by magical weapons. A little note down there to give some extra information about that, since it's important to have it to hand. In the center part of the screen, we're looking at the attack matrix for monsters, including goblins, hobgoblins, kobolds, orcs. It says parenthetically, although this is for all monsters. And it goes across the top based on the monster's hit dice number. So, if a creature is one hit die, one minus one, so goblins, right? Kobolds, rather. One for up to one minus one, so a half a hit die. Over on the left, one minus one hit die, one plus, 2 to 3 plus, 4 to 5 plus. And that plus is meant for those creatures that have, let's say, 5 hit dice plus 3 hit points. So it's included in that little section there. You don't move up another column just because of that. Notice the opponent armor class on the left, and I should have pointed this out on the previous tables. Zeros in the center, and generally you're looking at starting with a 20-sided to hit, all the way down to unarmored, an 11, even for something that is half a hit die, 10, and it just gets easier. And of course, minus 10. Once you add in all the pluses, if you include bonuses to armor, if you include maybe some other, well, there's a lot of things you don't add on this side, but you add on the attack roll. So keep that in mind. Don't confuse the two. Just below that, saving throw matrix for characters and human types. Separated clerics, fighters, magic users, and thieves. Their levels of advancement. Obviously, some have better saving throws for certain things. Spellcasters will have better spell saving throws than non-casters. That sort of thing. So give that a good look. There's some details down here regarding how each of those different categories works, whether it's paralyzation, poison, death magic, petrification or polymorph, rod, staff, or wand, breath weapons, or spells. And there's some helpful information on the bottom here of how to use this table, saving throw matrix for monsters. So you can use the same table, but it tells you how to use it so that you can handle your monsters through it. Again, this whole screen is always my main screen. Matrix for clerics affecting undead and an explanation of all that right on the screen itself. Just below that, saving throw matrix for magical and non-magical items. So, somebody blows you up for a fireball and you fail your saving throw, you're definitely going to be looking at some of these things. Does that scroll case protect that scroll? Those crystals or vials, leather, even magical leather armor gets a plus if it's magical, and all the other possible items that can be destroyed by magics or huge concussions, or there's all sorts of options on there. Acid, freezing cold, extreme colds, electricity. You've got all of that stuff on there. And as I said, this other screen, infinitely less useful. All of this information in the center and to the right is all about psionics. And because I don't use psionics, these two can often be considered wasted on me. Obviously, they're very useful to have on the table so you can clip things to them. Clip your map on the inside of one of them. If you want to put up some notes, players' names, and pertinent saving throws that you know are going to come up if you are In a given region or in a dungeon on a particular level, you might want to have a easy reference for wandering monster tables, what might be encountered. You want to make some notes possibly regarding some things that might come up, like if you enter area C and you're making a lot of noise, there's a good or a percentage chance that those creatures or guardians in area D will hear you and will come in guns ablazing, as it were, or will make ready defenses that they wouldn't normally have. If you've been noisy and creatures, guardians, monsters are aware of your presence and that you might be coming to get them, they're certainly going to prepare themselves better than if they have no idea you're sneaking up on them. On the left, even that upper table, assassinations. Rarely use it. I don't allow assassins in my game, uh, so except for certain coup de grace situations, not really useful. Although this lower section on the left, very useful. Grenade-like missiles. We're talking about throwing oil, acid, holy water, all sorts of things like that. It deals with the damage, the splash damage, which is incidental damage to nearby areas around where you actually do hit, and of course residual damage, because once a fire, an oily fire starts, it doesn't just go out immediately. It can linger on. So it talks in this whole section about how long effects will last and the lessening damage they will do as they taper off. All good information to have. And there you have it. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. We've gone through all of the screens there. I gotta say, probably the single most useful item outside of the books themselves, the three core books. I would rate it as if you're getting into first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons retrospectively, if you're getting into it again and don't recall what your situation was like back in the day when you were running it or playing it, and you want some advice on what to pick up first and foremost, well, start with the books. Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, you can run a game with those. In fact, when they were first released in 76, 77, 78, or was it 77, 78, 79? I think the latter. Um, they released the Monster Manual first. People were already playing D&D using the original rules, in some cases the early basic rules. And it was easy enough to take the Monster Manual monsters and integrate them into your games and start to learn the new terminologies that they might have added in. They were a lot more detailed. The formatting was different, became kind of unified at that point. You didn't have to go to a table to find out this information and read a description about the creature in another section. It was all condensed into little blocks, text blocks. So those are kind of the earliest forms of text block monsters. And it was easy to integrate those, pretty easy to integrate those. This over my head, original plus advanced. I always tout my games as being original plus advanced. People ask straight out, I'll just say first edition AD&D. It's easier, but quite frankly, without my background in playing original D&D from the time it came out through when they started releasing first edition D&D, that shaped the way that I approached first edition D&D in a lot of ways. That's probably something that I should discuss at some point in more detail. But that's a longer discussion. We'll leave it at that for today. We will say this. Player's Handbook, after Monster Manual, and then the DMG all came out in that order. I really don't see any reason why that shouldn't be the order. maybe the player's handbook first, and then you're playing in other games and stuff, and then at some point DMG might come second, and then the monster. There's a number of ways depending on whether you're playing in other people's games first or you're diving straight in as a DM. Either way, probably player's handbook first. If you're diving straight in as a DM, you could probably get away with holding off on the DMG till third. Soon after, though, you're going to want a DM screen. I would say even before getting any of the supplements like Unearthed Arcana or Deities and Demigods or any of the Monster Manual 2 or the Fiend Folio. After you get the three core books, definitely get yourself first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, Dungeon Master Screen, and some player character sheets. Always makes the game easier. All right. Well, I think that just about does it for what I want to talk about today. Any questions from the chat? It's been rather quiet. I've seen people in and out of that all day. Of course, Sarah's there, and I thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much. And I thank everybody. I appreciate anybody that can join us. And if you do join us for a live stream, by all means, follow the channel. It's something worth doing. It's good to have you chime in and join the conversation as it goes on. If you have questions or you want to make a astute observation, as Sarah often does, and others that join us here. And let me also say, those times you can join us are Monday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Central, right here on this Twitch channel. That's twitch.tv/Mark, M-A-R-K _CMG, Creative Mountain Games. And follow the channel. And also, if you're catching us up with us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe because you can do that. Let us know you're out there. You hit the little bell when you subscribe so you get notifications from when we upload new shows, which usually happens about within an hour after we finish the stream because I like to get it up right away. And while you're there, please do give thumbs up to any videos that you watch and enjoy. And of course, feel free to leave comments, constructive criticism, jump into the conversation, all of that when you're on YouTube as well. We appreciate everybody who takes the time to check out our little show here. This has been the OK Grognard Show from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Bye-bye.